This week, we're going to be writing the literature review, the first part of your final project. And you might feel going into this like you are in over your head. You might have started to look for papers. You should have done so and gotten your complete papers this last week, and it probably takes you all over the place. You probably feel like you don't know where to go and like you're immediately trapped in a maze that is very complicated. And rest assured, you are not alone in feeling that way. That is often the feeling you have at the start of your research paper. There's a lot out there. And eventually, as you keep reading a little bit each day, the ideas will become clear to you. It will take its form. You just have to be patient. So we're going to be writing a lot. You've probably already understood that things have changed. And now the second part of the semester, we're doing a lot of writing. One assignment per week until the end of the term. So this week we're writing the first draft of your lit review, one of the biggest pieces, and I'll give it back to you with comments. The sooner you get it to me, the better, but certainly by the due date, and I'll turn it around and get it back to you with comments, and you'll revise it for the next week. And then you'll have your first draft methods, then your results, your discussion, your title, your intro, and your conclusion, your presentation and critique, and then finally you'll submit your final paper. And you'll get feedback all along the way because this is a learning process. You're not expected to be perfect, but you do have the responsibility of submitting these pieces each week. So don't get yourself delayed behind and then come to me and say, oh, I'll just give you a final paper, because then you put me and you in this really awkward position of you submitting something that isn't going to be ready because you won't have gone through the process, and me being in this difficult position of having to decide whether to pass you when you didn't really do the work. So do the work each week. Just do it. Just do it. Just do it. So you might not be very motivated. Well, some of you might be excited about it. You might have a good idea and you're actually interested in your topic. I hope this is the case for you. And as you get along the way, you will get that overwhelmed feeling. And maybe as it gets closer, you'll get, that panic and that kind of really challenging feeling that we tend to get late in the semester. And it's just keep pushing through it. I'm confident you can do it. None of this is unusual. This is a big deal project. Why are we doing it? It's just one of those things you have to do. Increasingly, as you get closer to your degree, certainly the case for me at the end of my undergrad degree was having to write more research proposals. And definitely I had to do a lot of these when I got to grad school. And the reason for them is to get you curious, for one thing, thinking like a scientist, answering questions that are interesting and important, becoming familiar with a literature. By that I mean an academic literature on a topic that interests you. This is your starting point. And if you go to a grad school, especially at an R1, at a good top-notch university, you're going to have to do more of these, and it really is going to train your brain to think in a way that will benefit you. So learn your process here. This is a good place for you to learn something that you're going to need later on. So what is a literature review? So it's a part of the research paper that explains the existing research in your area of interest. So remember, in the sciences, we're always building. We're building upon a current research base. And so you have to know what other scientists have done in your field. So this is what you're writing. So it's going to explain the current state of knowledge by describing the key studies. It needs to link all the studies together in a rational way with logical connections. This is like the thread of connection between all the articles that you decide to save and include in your lit review. In your lit review, you need to introduce and define any key terms and theories that you're going to use in the proposal. So if there's maybe your dependent variable or a big theory that you're testing, more on all of these in a few minutes. It's going to be full of citations. Almost every sentence is going to be written based on someone else's research, so lots and lots of citations. And it'll end in a hypothesis for your own proposal that will extend current research. So step one, first point on the previous slide was explaining the current state of knowledge. So science is a building process. Studies build on previous studies to create a vast body of knowledge, and with this knowledge, we design tools that benefit humanity. Your job is to become expert in one small, maybe even one tiny body of knowledge, and then to impart this knowledge systematically by writing about the studies you read. And so what you're trying to do is find articles around a common theme, and they look for, you are creating a theme that leads to your establishing the case for needing your particular research proposal. And so all of these articles that you find should be building to this. And so if you're trying to build a logical case, you might have missing pieces. So the articles that you have right now might not be quite enough. So you need to look for missing pieces in your logic, search for additional articles if needed, if there's something you need to know more about, or there's a stepping stone that's missing, go search for an article that fills it. Making sure that your resources are empirical studies, peer-reviewed, just as we talked about. Ideally not literature reviews or not descriptive kinds of studies, but empirical and inferential studies. And you might need a background article, like for example, if you're doing something on, in the past students have done things about, say, the impact of a particular ceremony, and so then describing that ceremony, you might need a background article, and so maybe you'd find a book or a resource to explain a little bit of background. So just always think about building this knowledge, and you're trying to impart what exactly this knowledge base is. Don't give up. This is sort of a joke again. You maybe find just the right article that maybe establishes that there's a question that remains to be answered and that you have the study designed to answer it. So you're very, very happy. You find a new article and then you discover, oh no, they did the exact study that I was just imagining I would propose. And don't give up at that point. You can always tweak the study, your own idea, so that it advances that idea that you had previously thought you'd propose. So secondly, finding a common thread. So when you write your literature review, remember you're building up to your hypothesis. So the common thread should be something that each article is linked by this need to establish the basis for your hypothesis. So you might be reading a lot more articles than you actually use. You're probably going to go back and read the ones you choose many times to look for little details and to look for connections. So you'll be critiquing those articles. So what is missing in this particular study that I can fill the gap? That's why I'm only requiring a minimum of 6 articles in this, because I want you to read them really closely and link them together carefully. You can definitely have, and you might well need more than 6 articles, but those are the ones you have to really dive deep into. If you find that one of your articles isn't connected, like you thought it was a good one, but then you just can't find a good way to link it in, it doesn't fit along this thread, don't use it. Don't include it. As you're working, think about how you might present your studies. Like, what might be the first kind of a logical point that you'd want to make, and what article supports it? What might be second? One way to do this is this tip at the bottom. Use your note cards. Arrange and rearrange your note cards in the order that you think you might discuss this research. Think about how one article leads to the next and use these connections as segues. So you have to have your articles connected. You can't just write a paragraph about an article and then write a paragraph about the next article. There has to be a logical basis for connecting these articles. So this is this thread that needs to be there. And always refer back to that common thread as you link the articles. So it's up to you to really make a nice logical foundation in what you're doing and what you're presenting. And I will add that you don't need to present just one article at a time. As you look at the literature review in your articles that you're reading, you might find that they're having several articles in one small paragraph. And that's a good way to do a lit review, is to synthesize the articles and find common themes. So the third point was that you need to define key terms and theories. So any terms or theories that you're going to be using in your proposal should be defined and explained here. So any terms related to your topic, like sometimes there are phrases and acronyms that are common. A really common one that you will probably already know is socioeconomic status, which is commonly used as an acronym of SES. And so this you need to do early in your paper. If there are any terms or acronyms that you're going to be using, you have to define them and then introduce the acronym. Likewise, any theories that underpin your topic, explain the theory. Make sure that your dependent variable is included in the definitions. So we should, coming out of this, have a pretty good idea of what you're going to be measuring, and possibly your independent variables too. And any terms or phrases, like some sort of a measurement term that might be unfamiliar to someone who didn't read up on your topic, define it. That's your job here. Next, cite everything. So your lit review is not you talking. Every single thing that you're putting in your lit review is someone else's work, and you need to cite that work. So if you make a statement, for example, in our first bullet point that says, previous research has shown that something, 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 you'll include in parentheses examples of studies that showed that. So anytime you say mention previous research or relate any finding or method, you need to put the sources. That's going to be in parentheses after the fact that you stated. We'll look at that a little later. So what you're doing here, if you picture yourself as an attorney calling up witnesses in a trial, these sources, these papers that you read, these are your witnesses, and they speak for themselves. So this is what you really need to concentrate on here. And one thing to note, if you're using only one source for a whole paragraph, you don't have to cite it multiple times unless it becomes unclear that it's the same core source. You can cite it at the start, and as long as it's clear that you're still talking about the same study, you don't have to recite it. And I'll talk to you a little more about this in a bit. Finally, you're going to end up with your hypothesis. So your lit review will end with a hypothesis statement. All of your writing in the lit review builds a case for this hypothesis you're going to study. As you're writing in the lit review, you should kind of identify questions that are unanswered that you're going to answer in your study. So this is what you're looking for, questions that are unanswered. So as you're reading your articles, you'll probably notice at the end of these articles that the authors suggest new research. You know, they'll say future studies might, and they'll give you ideas. So if you're stuck on ideas, go to that part of the article. And of course, I'll go more over how to write a hypothesis with you. So as you're figuring out how to do this, pay attention to the lit review in the articles you're reading. Take a little time to look at it. It's going to be located after the introduction and before the methods section. And it might, might be a couple pages. And so pay attention. How did the author structure the lit review? What common thread did they link? Did the author use subheadings in their lit review? How did they link the paragraphs? How did they make sure that one paragraph led to the next paragraph? What does their hypothesis look like? How did they state the gap that led to the hypothesis? So these will help you as you're learning.